Hi. Well, this is going to be a bit of a different one because I want to talk about something very, very different to what I normally make videos about today. Normally I'm making the Tresena videos and I'll have one of them coming up too. But there's something that I've been really wanting to make a video about for some time, and that's the influence of the planet Venus, because for many people this year has been fairly challenging. And there's some things which have come into play at certain times which I'd like to explain through the calendars and through some of the traditions. So, as I say, I think for many people there's been a lot of challenges going on this year, and you kind of wonder where they come from, because some of these things just seem to have come out of the blue. There we were, I don't know, end of last year, going along and everything seems pretty good and everything's going pretty fine, and all of a sudden it's like these side swipes come out of nowhere and knock us off our perch, for want of better words. So what is it? What happened? What's going on? Is there something that we can look to for guidance? Is there something that we can look to say, well, why does it happen? What does it all mean? And when's it going to end? Because, I mean, when's it going to end is probably the one that a lot of people are going to be asking, right? So, what we could look at, and one of the things that I was alerted to by one of my friends. Now, I'm gonna branch into a little bit of Western astrology here. Now, I have to say, I hold my hands up. I know very little about Western astrology. I rely on other people to tell me about stuff like that because it's not somewhere that I've studied. But I don't know, I think it was about April, May of this year, one of my friends posted a video, which I'll link at the end of this video somewhere, by a guy called Kaipacha. And what he was saying was the reason why the year 2018 is, in his view, the year of alchemical transformation. And alchemical transformation is something that I have a great interest in. I think a lot of us do. It is the hero's path. It is turning the lead into gold, only the lead into gold being ourselves as we're evolving along our path, right? And so he talked about this 12-year period. And he talked about, like, in October of last year, about Jupiter going into Scorpio within Western astrology. And it's spending the time in that, and it's all about this release, this kind of conditions, ideas, relationships that we've had, coming to the point of death, coming to the point of renewal, coming to this kind of like the ending of things so that we can be reborn, this alchemical transformation. And so I looked at this and I thought, well, this is very, very interesting, because certainly this is something that I know many of us are experiencing this year. It's kind of like literally things are being ripped away from us, mostly the things that we're trying to hold on to, mostly the things that often we know that it's run its course, it's done its time and that, but we're still holding on to it anyway. And it's kind of like, let's say the training wheels have been removed, and if we don't want them to be removed, they're being removed anyway. I look on it as, it's kind of one of the things that came to me this morning was about the blacksmith, and how the blacksmith might create a work of art from the hot iron that comes from the fire. But in order to create that work of art, he uses the hammer. And the hammer comes down on the anvil, on that hot iron, and will create beauty. But I can imagine that hammer is a pretty harsh process to go through in the first place. So like I say, I'll link Kaipacha's video at the end of this one so that you can have a look at that, because I think it's well worth watching for everybody. It certainly gave me an interesting insight into this. But of course, my area that I want to deal with is where it all fits within Mayan calendars and how that works out. And what I found was that this year there was a particular correlation that happens about every 8 years. It happens every 8 years less 2 days. So it's going to move with what we would call the solar cycle of the Maya calendars, in that because that's a 365-day calendar, it's going to move back 1 day every 4 years. Now that exactly links it into a cycle of Venus, and maybe one of the things that the Kaipacha video did was to make me look at the stars, because certainly Venus is one of the most interesting ones for me, and it was certainly one of the most interesting ones for the Maya. What we have here is the Dresden Codex, or my copy of it anyway, and what we have right here are the Venus tables within the Dresden Codex. They record the movements of Venus over the course of 104 years. And this table, which is all written with regards to the sacred calendar, so they're all days of the Chok'ik that appear over those 5 panels, it's still accurate. It still works. Earlier this year, we made a trek to El Mirador, and we were sitting on top of one of the temples at sunset, waiting for Venus to appear as the evening star, because that's what phase it had just gone into. It was a pretty special experience. So we have all sorts of things coming into alignment this year. It's kind of like force upon force upon force. And all of these forces could be seen as forces for change, could be seen as forces of, that blacksmith, that cosmic blacksmith, as it were. Okay, so I already talked about a little bit about Jupiter and Scorpio. As I said, being as that's not really my area, I'll let somebody else explain that. We had, on February 20th of this year, the year of 6 Kech began. Now, when 6 Kech was coming in, we were kind of like convinced that this was going to be this great, stable, strong year. I mean, Kech has this reputation for being wild and strong. I mean, it represents the wilderness. It's the forces of nature that come in. And Kech also represents the spiritual leader. So, you're looking at it and thinking, wow, this is great. This is kind of like, all about embodying that. Now we have it with the number 6, and the number 6 representing ultimate stability, representing drawing on the above and below into the material plane. The material plane represented by the 4, then these extra 2 points, the above and the below, the divine masculine and the divine feminine feeding into that material plane. So 6 Kech, well, great, this is kind of like talking about the marriage of the divine feminine, divine masculine, bringing that into the physical plane and enhancing our, ability as spiritual leaders through that, for want of better words. Now, I know kind of like spiritual leader all sounds like a very high and mighty term, but really this is kind of like talking about our evolution into something which is just walking up a step, just kind of evolving our soul a little bit more so that we can act as a signpost, so we can help the people who kind of like are walking their path. We just help them along, right? Okay, so that's a spiritual leader. It's not kind of like putting on robes and all that kind of stuff. Well, it doesn't have to be anyway. So that's kind of what we're talking about. So we're looking at this year thinking, wow, this is going to be really amazing. Kind of like we're going to come into this leadership kind of thing. So we have that. And as I said, we also have the other side of Kech. Kech being the deer. Kech being the horse, if we want. And Kech having the strength of the horse, Kech having the kick of the horse. Kech being wild, unpredictable. Kech being the one that will charge straight through you if you try and stop it. Kech being the one which will kick the sides out of the stable if you try and close it in, if you try and box it in. So it also has that. And Kech years are known as these turbulent years. They're turbulent. Well, Ich years are turbulent. Kech years are strong and forceful and dominating. So you can't hold it back. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And Kech enhances that, right? So 6 Kech began on the 20th of February. Now, the way that I see these years progressing, the solar year is, of course, in the Mayan solar calendar is 365 days. We move the start date of the solar year back 1 day every 4 years. Okay, so the in one way or another, we're keeping count in the right way, but it does move. So it's right now it's 20th of February. It will stay 20th of February till 2020. Then 2021 it will move back to the 19th of February, and so on as we go through that cycle. Now, we are then fitting a pattern of 260 days, the sacred calendar, into a pattern of 365 days. So, we are talking about the year lord of Kech. Every 20 days, Kech will appear again as a different number, and it will do that 13 times because that will give us our 260 days. So, as we go through a solar year, we have 18 months of 20 days plus the 5 days of Wayeb. Each of those months of 20 days will begin on a Kech day. So what we do is we're going through the Cholkik, the sacred calendar, we're going to go through the 13 apparitions of Kech, and then we're going to go through 5 further apparitions of Kech, and then we're going to go through the 5 days of Wayeb. And I generally represent it like this. This is a chart that you may have seen on my site, and you can see that we have 2 pyramids. What I would call the pyramid of life, the growing phase of the maize, and the pyramid of death, the dry season, the harvest season. Okay? Now, as with many things, we look at the way that the power raises, and the power is always going to raise, and then it's going to drop, and then it's going to raise, and then it's going to drop. It's not in straight lines. It's not in a square wave pattern. And what we're doing is we're putting it here onto a pyramid to give an idea of the strength of the year lord increasing as the height of the sun increases, we could say, as the strength of the sun increases. Now, it's interesting because right at this moment, as I said, the solar year is going to move back one day every 4 years. But right at this moment, this peak of the influence of the year lord happens at 20th of June. This peak of the influence of the solar year happens in the middle of the solar year, in the northern hemisphere, where the Maya lands are, is the summer solstice. Okay, so what we have is the strongest effect of the year lord 6 Kech taking its effect between June 20th and July 10th. So, as the year lord came in February, March, April, May, we started getting faced with stuff. We started getting faced with the stuff which was, let's say, out of alignment. Because if we are to become that strong and stable leader in whatever way that we are a leader, we can't have loose ends hanging around. We can't have debris on the floor. Now, last year, 5 blew stuff around and blew it upside down, this kind of thing. Well, here's Kech kicking it all out of the way and literally using that force, using that strength to clear the debris out of the way so that we can create stability. So anything that hadn't been dealt with got kicked. Anything that wasn't in alignment with where we're going, how we can transform, how we can bring about that alchemical change in ourselves and in our soul, needed to be kicked around, needed to be kicked out of play. So Kech comes along and does that. And right around the middle of the year, 20th of June to the 10th of July, that was when that power was at its strongest. So we all had, if we've had stuff going on, like it's likely that since the 10th of July, things have begun to ease off a bit. It reached its peak just when we thought that there was probably no more kicking that could be done, just when we thought that we were kind of like, right, okay, can this get any stronger? The answer was yes, it could. And it kept kicking and kept kicking and kept kicking. Then, I don't know about you, but like July, August time, it started to wane, okay? And again, this is what we see here. The energy of the year lord starting to wane as the height of the sun, as the power of the sun starts to come back down. And what we find is that those 13 months of the solar year within the Mayan calendar, which take us from 6 Kech appearing as the year lord to 6 Kech appearing in his second appearance, well, that takes us up to the 7th of November, when 6 Kech comes around again. Now, this is a date that I think is going to be really important. And there's a reason why, which will become clear as we go through it. So right now, we've got somewhere around about, I think it's around about 47 days or so left until that time, until 7th of November. So there are still a few surprises around. There's still a few things happening, but we're kind of like getting to the point where, well, some of us have just resigned to the idea that there's nothing quite stable at the moment. There's nothing quite going to work out at the moment. Don't try and make any commitments until November, because it's just not happening right now. There's still stuff going on. It's still a work in progress, and we can't see exactly what it is. So we're just going to have to ride it out for a little while longer. Like I say, around about 47 days or so, and then it'll all be good. Okay? So I mentioned earlier that there is also a planetary cycle going on with this, and this is a planetary cycle that we see once every 8 years, and this is a cycle of Venus. Now, those cycles of Venus that I showed you within the Dresden Codex, I've actually created a slightly more up-to-date version in Excel of how all of those dates work, how it all kind of like comes together within the structure of the sacred calendar. And what we find is that this year, on the 23rd of February, Venus appeared as the evening star. Now, Venus goes through 4 phases. It appears as the morning star, then it disappears, then it appears as the evening star, then it disappears again. And that whole process takes about 584 days, but because of the way that Venus moves, it actually repeats that cycle. And so it repeats it 5 times, and we end up with a total of 2,920 days, which is 2 days short of 8 years. As I say, if we're working with a 365-day solar calendar, as the Maya did, then what we actually get is that Venus will stay in harmony with that, although it doesn't exactly stay in harmony with our Gregorian calendar. So when this cycle comes around again in 8 years' time, we'll find that it doesn't start on the 23rd of February, it starts on the 21st of February, but that time we'll be ready, right? So, on the 23rd of February, on the day 9Z, Venus reappeared as the evening star. Now, I've been wanting to make this video for a while, but I've been waiting for the inspiration. I've been waiting for a few other little pieces to drop in. And last week I got given one of those big pieces, which was something, you know, sometimes you just don't see it. It's sitting there right in front of you. You just didn't see what it was about. And I had a conversation with a very, very inspirational guy called Vinny, and he reminded me of something. He reminded me that everything is about twins. Now, it's very often written, and it's probably very often written in both places, but the morning star apparition of Venus is seen as Quetzalcoatl, the great teacher, the bringer of light. Okay, and so when we're in the morning star phase, as we were last year up until, I think it was up until 25th of November of last year, which again is interesting, we were in this morning star phase. So when going back to the Scorpio, the Jupiter in Scorpio thing, when Jupiter first went into Scorpio, we were still in the morning star phase of Venus. We were still in the bringer of light phase of Venus. We were still in that kind of like, hey, everything's okay kind of phase of Venus. On the 25th of November, Venus disappeared from view, and it disappears from view for about 80 or 90 days, depending on who you ask, depending on how you observe it, and what you're following. So it disappeared from view on the 25th of November, according to the Dresden Codex, according to the calendars that we're following here. And for me, that's when things started going a bit sideways, okay? On the 23rd of February, while things were already starting to go sideways, that's when it appears as the evening star. So the evening star phase is the opposite of the morning star phase, right? If we have Quetzalcoatl as the morning star phase, we have Tezcatlipoca as the evening star phase. Okay, and this, sorry, I got that name wrong. It's smoking mirror. It's the obsidian mirror, and This is about looking inside of ourselves. This is like the dark mirror that shows us the stuff that we don't want to see. This is where the alchemical transformation comes, because it's all very well being that bright light of Quetzalcoatl and going through that light phase, because that's the nice one. That's the illumination phase. That's when it's kind of good for a lot of us. But when we're faced with that dark mirror, when we're faced to look at the stuff, when we're faced to look at our patterns, when we're faced to look at our relationships, when we're faced to look at all of that stuff, that's when it starts to get a bit edgy, right? That's when like we're really kind of like, right, okay, these mirrors come up. And we may have seen this. I've talked to many people about this year, about how if it's not people from our past coming back as mirrors of kind of like, okay, have we let this go, or is this still ongoing? We're meeting people who are like avatars of our past. It's like they embody maybe 2, maybe 3 people that we recognize from our past. We see these patterns. We look at it and we think, oh, hang on, that person really reminds me of that person there, but they've got a bit of that person there. And this is kind of like possibly some unresolved relationship issues or something like that coming back, being brought in by the influence of that dark mirror, making us look inside ourselves and saying, right, okay, we got to deal with this now. Because we can't have that stability, we can't bring in that next level if we still got these loose ends hanging around, if we still got these kind of like bits that need to be resolved. Okay, so what we have is the power of Venus as the evening star. It's superimposed onto the 6th Kech year. Okay, now the really interesting thing for me is that Venus will stay as the evening star until the 31st of October. Then it will go through its 8 days of darkness before it then rises as the morning star on the day 7 Anil, which is the 8th of November. So you remember that from this chart, we have the Year Lord whose power is in the ascendant phase up until the 7th of November. And then we have Venus, whose power as the evening star is there until 31st of October, but then rises again as the morning star on the 8th of November. Okay, and so it's really interesting to me that these 2 things link up. And I've kind of done this graphic just to show what I mean. Here we are with the power of the Year Lord getting to its maximum in June, and the power of Venus getting to its maximum in June as well. Okay, so they're both hitting the same phase. And then literally, as the Year Lord goes into the dry cycle, into the underworld cycle, that's when the morning star starts to rise. That's when the light starts to come back to the world. That's when it all gets a bit brighter for us, I think. I hope. That's the resurrection, right? This is where we've walked that dark path, that western path, because the dark star, the evening star phase of Venus is in the west. The morning star phase is in the east. This is the bright star that rises again. This is the rebirth of the sun. So this is the rebirth of ourselves. Maybe this kind of like this process of alchemy that we're going through will then be over. We'll be then reborn. And the interesting thing for me is particularly that when I looked it up, going back to the Jupiter in Scorpio piece, is that Jupiter moves out of Scorpio on the 8th of November as well. And so we see all of these things aligning. We see the 8th of November as this very strong point in the year where I think we're going to be hopefully breathing a sigh of relief after all those alchemical transformations have happened, and we finally walk back into the light again. Okay, so this is an interesting thing, and as I said, if we look at it, well, with regards to the Jupiter in Scorpio, that happens every 12 years. With regards to Venus and the Year Lord being aligned, that happens every 8 years, so it's always going to happen on a Kech year. And the next time that it's going to happen should be in around about 24 years time. It should happen about every 24 years. So thankfully we're kind of like not going to have to necessarily go through this practice again for a little while. I think it's, you know, it's all going to be good. We're all going to come out of this and stronger for it, I guess. And hopefully by mid-November we should have brought some stability back in. But I think this is also why, as I said, trying to make commitments, trying to make attachments, trying to create stability at this point in time is kind of like there's nothing to anchor to. We've got all of these things which are coming up and they're showing us our stuff. We've got to do this work. We've got to go through this alchemical change. We've got to receive those hammer blows from the blacksmith to bring out our true beauty, which is going to come out in November. And for the time being, it's just allowing ourselves to stay fluid, allowing ourselves to look into that mirror, to face what needs to be faced, to change what needs to be changed, to go through it, to allow it to happen, and then to walk out the other side glowing, let's say. So I hope this has been of interest for you. I'm going to put up some links, and I'm going to put up some graphics so that you can see some of the stuff that I put into the video a bit clearer. And I hope you enjoyed it. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.